Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of the HEMA Pandemic Interview Series. Today I'm talking to Anthony Longis. Anthony is a stuntman who has over 47 years of experience in the industry. He's worked on stage, he's worked in movies, he's worked in television, he's worked in opera. He's worked with some of the biggest names in the industry, and I'm so excited to get to hear some of his stories today. I hope you enjoy them as much as I will. So thanks a lot for joining me, Anthony. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. One of the best things for me is that I get to learn from you every time I talk to you, and it's fantastic. And anybody who has the opportunity to just listen to you and learn from you should jump on it. And I have a lot of great questions for you, So thanks for being here. So, Anthony, one of the questions I wanted to know is, when did you know you wanted to be an actor?
It's kind of funny. Actually, I watched last night. They were doing. I had the two great teachers in my life are Maestro Ralph Faulkner, who I studied with for over a dozen years, and then Guru Nana Santu, who I studied with for over a decade. And they're in my work. Everything I do. It's because of what they had taught me that I created my very unique DeLongis rolling loop system that rolls and stabs instead of yanks and slashes. But they did a Bruce Lee documentary last night that was on. It's called Be Water, which is quite fascinating because there were a lot of things I knew. There's some things I didn't know. In one of them, they were talking about, the inherent racism that, was pervasive. And, as it turned out, I worked with David Carradine a couple times, and, which Bruce Lee had the bad luck to, quite slightly wrong place, slightly wrong time, to where, both his Kung Fu idea and then his what was silent flute and became Circle of Iron, David got to play both of those parts because he was white. And, so that was unfortunate. But there's a very quick flash of Marlon Brando in something called Tea House of the August Moon. That was the first play I ever did in high school. I was in the 10th grade, and I was kind of a skinny kid, and I didn't have a lot of self-confidence, or, kind of floundering around, wasn't particularly good at sports because I couldn't see. I had glasses, so I was too skinny to play the line, and I couldn't see to play the backfield. And I always thought football was the sport where, 10 guys distract you while somebody sneaks up behind you and flattens you. Anyway, I went out and I thought, oh, I can go out and be a villager or something. This might be fun. I got the lead in the production. It's Sakini.
Surprise.
Yeah, well, it was kind of fun. And it changed my life because tremendous amount of dialogue on stage all the time. He's the heart of the piece that, connects the disparate American forces with the indigenous peoples, and it's a charming little play. It is inherently racist, but who knew that stuff back in, this would have been
75 or so?
Oh, no, long before that. This would have been let's see, I was in the 10th grade, so I was 15, so that would have been about 65.
Okay.
And anyway, it was it gave me confidence in myself, and I liked it, and I went and what was true then is true now. It was both the hardest thing I'd ever done and the easiest thing I'd ever done. And since then, I love the work. I don't much care for the business, because your ability very often has very little to do with whether or not you work, so that can be frustrating. But the work itself demands your very best, usually under horrible conditions. So that's what I tell people. It's like, don't say you can do something unless you can do it really well under adversity. And then, of course, one of the things whether I'm working as an actor or whether I'm coming in and, you know, creating character-driven action with weapons or whatever it happens to be. Um, I try to always take adversity and turn it into opportunity. And it's happened for me a bunch of times in that article that you just read on the sword master's point of view that you know, I shared with you. There's a couple examples of that happening. You said it was going to be like this. Now all of a sudden you've got 200 X's and 4 cameras, and it's a split day because we've got to go tonight, so we have no time to shoot this. Give me 10 minutes. Okay, we can go now. You know, so it's and it comes down to things that you mentioned later, but it's why you never stop learning and you never stop training, because training knowledge gives you choices, and your art is in your choices. You know, and you know, and of course, the more you train, the more you start seeing foundational principles that connect the arts. You know, I say there's weapon specific adjustments that maximize the effectiveness of that tool, or that reference a certain culture, or but there are principles that make all systems combatably effective, and they have a tendency to, as Bruce Lee would say, the ribbons of truth, they interconnect. So there's things that I learned in Filipino Kali that later on I went, this is the first time I've ever seen Talhofer. I know that technique. It's a different tool,
Yeah.
but the technique is the same. And now my third grade teacher is Kaiso Toshishiro Obata, and my sensei Matthew Lynch. So I don't know, I guess I'm 10 or 11 years into Shinkendo now. But I'm looking. We've not too long ago we got into Nitoken, which is two sword. You know, most people don't teach that. And Kaiso is, well, he's a genius. And it's Kaiso Obata. But I've been really enjoying the Nitoken 2 sword. And again, there are things I'm going, he does 5 variations on what's essentially the same technique, but it looks totally different because of which sword you use and how you use it and what you do with it after you have, because, you know, you're catching, redirecting, you're monitoring, or, you know, whatever it happens to be, you're doing what's essentially stesso tempo, you know, where a single time where you're cutting into the attack to, you know, turn a defensive move into an offensive move. So I'm kind of going, well, it's one of the reasons Matthew likes working with me, because he says, I understand what the technique is supposed to accomplish. I'm learning the language of this particular, you know, discipline. So it's a fascinating study that is constantly, it replenishes our passions. I don't need to explain this to you, but you know,
I like to think of it as if different styles of martial arts are dialects of our universal physical communication.
yes, and that's a wonderful way to put it. You know, because, well, I tell people, like when I trained Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman, she realized right away I was trying to give her another language to help create another layer to her performance and to give her tremendous credibility. And she got so good that, I mean, we had, you know, Kathy Long, who was 5-time world kickboxing champion, had come in to double for some fight stuff. You know, Trish Peters, who was a world-class gymnast, was doing, you know, her gymnastics and things like that. It's kind of funny. Max Clevin, who was the coordinator, had said, okay, he introduced all these people, you know, and Anthony, we were actually rehearsing where I taught at UCLA for 19 years. I got the rehearsal space and said, on here, and she'll be doing this. And Michelle goes, you don't tell me, I tell you. You know, basically she did as much as she could of everything she could. She did all her fights. They had a couple of inserts, you know, because you've got Kathy Long, you know, kickboxing champion. Oh, okay, that was, yeah, that sidekick was Kathy, but, you know, it's still Michelle out there, you know, doing the stuff. But with the whip, none of the girls got anywhere near her. She does all her own whip work. It's all practical. And at the end, she said, well, if you weren't an actor, this wouldn't have been nearly as effective, because, you know, she embraced it as, here's another language that I can use. And I gave her such a strong foundation in our 6 weeks of training. We were very fortunate there. And then I was with her throughout the filming. We'd walk on a set and look at the difficulties of it and go, okay, let's turn this into an opportunity. You know, we're going to deal with this by staying, you know, in the vertical plane. We'll come over here and go into the diagonal plane. We'll come up here and go into horizontal so that we won't get caught on all this furniture and crap, you know, and we actually created stuff on site, which was very gratifying because and the Ice Princess sequence. Do you remember that at all? Where the Ice Princess is captured and Batman finds her,
Yeah.
you know, and you know Michelle comes in and cuts her loose, and you know, throws a chair and grabs the girl, and they leave. They have a lot of dialogue, you know. And Tim Burton had said to me, "I don't think there's any whip stuff here today, Anthony." I went, "Yes, sir," and I just stood in the corner and watched the rehearsal, you know. And after it was done, because Michelle and I had this kind of relationship, I could talk to her, you know, about this stuff. And I said, you know, if you were to swing in on your whip and you cut her free with your nails and dump her out of the chair, a chair in one hand and a whip in the other says lion tamer the world over, no matter what language you speak.
Yeah.
You know, and she goes, Tim, Anthony has this idea. So in 5 minutes, okay, she swung in, she cut her loose, she dumped her here like this, she cracked the whip, she threw the chair, the girl's trying to get away, she wraps the girl on the waist, pulls her in for a 2-shot, says her line, girl talk, and they leave. We rehearsed it twice and shot it, and we were done, and then we moved on. But we were able to create because she had a body of knowledge, you know. And so that's one of my big things. I try to convince producers. Well, my ideal is when I get to play opposite, you know, whoever the person is, preferably in the role, or I can do that because, like when I was working with Christian Kane on Secondhand Lions, we had a last minute. Where did these 200 extras come from? And what do you mean you're going to use 4 cameras? You said, okay, give me 10 minutes. And I just kind of went, okay, what was the end, which was a 2-on-1 fight? We're going to use that to get you a second sword, and then I will leap in and we'll do a 2-sword, you know, thing. And that will be our new ending after we've gone through the 10 guys that, you know, we previously rehearsed. And it was just, you're able to do that if you have given somebody, you know, the tools. You know,
Right.
they don't get thrown, they don't get intimidated, you know.
And it's a very strong foundation if you, as you you go out and you learn as many skills as you can.
Yeah. Well, it gives you choices, you know, so you never really run out of ideas. You're not sitting there going, well, what am I going to do now? Yeah. It's like watching a Jackie Chan movie, you know. I mean, he's probably the only actor I can think of that goes, he really doesn't need a good script or dialogue. He's going to walk in somewhere and which is of course not true, but he's going to tell a story with action. And as you said earlier, I think of it in terms of, I mean, I started in Shakespeare, the old Globe Theater in San Diego. I played Iago twice. I played Vincencio in Measure for Measure, 2 of the longest parts in the English language, and a lot of others as well. So I really appreciate the power of the written word. That's verbal dialogue. To me, choreography is physical dialogue, and it should be that same extension of a specific character who has a tool that he feels invulnerable with, excuse me, and he uses in a very specific manner. So you're having a dialogue going back and forth that, you know, maybe has some verbal in it, but it's a physical dialogue. It's not just 2 people, you know, doing this.
Right.
And sword slappy.
And that actually segues really well into my next question, is that you've worked on stage with a lot of iconic actors. You've mentioned that you've been Iago, Vincencio. What's your what's one of the most memorable stage shows that you've done, and with actors that just sticks out in your mind?
Just as you were doing that, you know, in Romeo and Juliet, I played Tybalt. I've choreographed it a bunch of times. Hamlet, I've never played Hamlet, But I did play, you know, Rosencrantz and we ran it in repertory with Hamlet one night where it was Rosencrantz, and then we Tom Stoppard's Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are Dead was the second night. So we'd go back and forth in repertory, which was a lot of fun. Well, one of my first big roles, my first big role was Edgar in King Lear. That was pretty huge. Edward Payson Call was Lear. He was, well, I was very young. I was, this would have been 1973. I was 23. This was my first job coming out. I'd gone down. I got into the company. I was essentially a spear carrier and an extra, you know, and changing the scenes and stuff because that's part of the apprenticeship program. And then part opened up. Actually, Mark Singer, who was down there that season, didn't Beastmaster.
I was gonna go. I know that name.
Yeah, and he had a conflict, and so they opened up. They read the company, and I got to play Edgar. So you know, it was it's a great part. You know, a lot of complexity, and you know, for a young man of 23, this was something. The next season, I came back and was Tybalt in Romeo and Juliet, and then I was John in Henry IV Part 2. I got to work with Victor Buono, who was an extraordinary man. Very, very talented, very funny. You probably remember him from the Wild Wild West and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and whatever happened to Baby Jane, and tremendous character. But he was, while he was with us, he essentially owned the role of Falstaff. Okay. You know, and was very, very good at it. And he was a big man. He was well over 300 pounds. I would say I couldn't get my arms around him when I would hug him, and there were times when I just had to hug him because he was really a great man. But he would bind up his knees, and he would prance and float across the stage like it was just like, damn, man. So that was huge. My first big piece of choreography was they came down from the Amundsen, which is, you know, big theater in LA. They were going to do Cyrano de Bergerac, and I had done a green show, so they saw fencing and stuff, and then they saw my work as Edgar, and they wanted me to come up and read. And as it turned out, do you know who? Oh shit, I'll think of his name in just a second. Anyway, the opportunity opened up to choreograph, so I got to come up and play. It was funny. I was offered either a full scholarship to ACT in San Francisco, or I could get my equity card and go to, you know, and do Cyrano de Bergerac with Richard Chamberlain at the Amundsen. I chose the equity card because, yeah, it was interesting. It was an interesting dilemma. But I did, and Richard was tremendous. I did some very ambitious work. Of course, I was the bad guy, so I pulled out a dagger at some point, you know. And but we got great reviews. We ran for 11 weeks. Richard had one bobble in a preview. Otherwise, he was, you know, dead on. And he was going, "I'll never be able to do this." I said, "Sure you will." And that was where I first started going, we have chosen moves to tell a story. You don't have to remember the moves, just tell the story. Yeah. Because it's like you're doing lines. You know, your line here happens to be in response to what I'm doing here. And then, of course, it was the duel and rhyme. And, of course, if the duel and rhyme doesn't work, the rest of the play really doesn't work. You know, so it was a big one for me. The next year I got called to come back and be in Macbeth, the Scottish play with Charlton Heston and Vanessa Redgrave, and Peter Wood was directing. It was he was one of the three British Peters at the time. Golly, who was it who toured with the Mahabharata? There was Peter Wood, and there was Peter. I can't think of their names at the time. This is 75. You know, it's a couple years ago.
It's been a day or two.
And you know, and then I love doing theater work. You just can't make a living. I went on to do a lot of. They kind of stopped mounting shows from the ground up at the Amazon. They started importing shows more from New York, so there was less of that. I worked at the Mark Taper Forum and did a lot of shows there where they had me come in and do, I would do action or choreography for a wide variety of things. Everything from Miss Evers' Boys, about where they were experimenting on black men, letting them run syphilis full course, to something called, anyway, it was a very elaborate sort of turn of the century Mark Twain type of period, and anything and everything in between. And then I started choreographing action for LA Opera, which I did from '85 to 2005.
Wow, that's a long run.
It's very interesting. Well, yeah. And I mostly left because the lady who was there, who had championed me, combination of politics, and then she passed, and I just sort of went, it won't be the same. But it was quite an adventure there. For the most part, I had a partner, an assistant fellow named Ed Douglas. He's been my friend for many, many years. And I said, you want to come down and, help me with this, and we'll divvy up this. But opera requires a lot of adult supervision, in that you have people with these world-class voices. I mean, it's just like, I've literally had my hair and ears pinned back with the power of their voice, but most of them haven't had a conversation with their body in years. And it's really traditional for them to stand on one side of the stage and stand on the other side, and maybe they come together and they'll sort of grab each other and sway back and forth a couple times, and then that's that. They always let me re-choreograph, and I worked with Placido Domingo a number of times, and then a lot of other both established and up and coming opera stars, and I've got some wonderful memories. Maybe the next chapter I write in the book is the opera chapter. I'll share it with you when I write it.
That's fantastic.
But it was really amazing because I always kept myself, outside. I said, I can't be on stage and get a good look at it. But we did a production called La Fanciulla del West, which means the Girl of the Golden West. And it's the original spaghetti Western. It was written by Verdi in like 1911. And it's about the gold rush, at the turn of the century in Alaska. And she's Minnie, and she runs the saloon, and and all the prospectors, and then there's Dick Johnson, who's the bandit in disguise, and it's a real melodrama. But I just kind of went, I am not going to miss the opportunity to be on stage, and because I had my partner, I said, "You're the eyes in the audience, I'm here." And we did a barroom brawl. Well, we already had more people on the stage that had come in from New York, but I got to re-choreograph, and so we already had a crowded stage and a rake stage and this and that, and we had a barroom brawl where I brought in 12 guys, 12 of my guys, and guys that I'd worked with at the Conan Sword Spectacular at Universal, and another place in the business. I said, this is going to be a unique adventure for you. And they afterwards, they said, this was so amazing, man. Thank you. Thank you for having us come in. But there were we got to beat up Placido Domingo. I was doing a knee drop onto his solar plexus. I'm
How
going,
many people get to say
I know
that?
what I'm doing, yeah. And but we had the barroom brawl. I had guys coming out of the second story, and we had horses, and and a wagon, and just all this stuff. And then at the end, they said, well, can you do a rope? And I said, well, I can, but I'm better with a whip. And so in one scene, one guy is making a break for it to get away. He's a captured bandit, and I wrap him around the neck. He's headed straight for the audience, and I wrap him around the neck and pull him back. This was a guy I'd worked with before in other operas. So he said, oh yeah, Anthony, you want to do? Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And I'm kind of going, opera singer voice. Wow. Okay, cool. Well, my responsibility. And we did that. And then we got to a point where in the music, they said, could you crack your whip here? I said, well, would you like, or would you like crack, 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 crack? They said, yeah, that second one. So every night when we get to that point, the orchestra would stop, and I was essentially the orchestra. Now, all well and good, you know, a certain amount of, you know, pressure, but I had to do this while straddling a wheel on a wagon on the rake stage. And Placido, who I'd worked with a bunch of times in productions of Carmen and Stephalio and, you know, and now this, he kept edging down stage from where my whip path was going to go. And I'm going, Placido, I know you trust me and I won't hit you, but stop encroaching on my space. So we would, you know, we would do that every night. So those are a couple that immediately come to mind.
Wow, that's a long time and a lot of amazing people you've worked with on stage. When did you make the transition from stage to movie, or were you doing them at the same time?
Doing it at the same time as much as I could. I was getting more theater work, and then I was getting a lot of choreography work. I joined Actors Equity in '74 when I did Cyrano. In '75, I joined SAG. It was just SAG then, not SAG-AFTRA. But there were years that if I was having to depend on just my acting income, I would have starved or given up like almost everybody I know who did. This is a very tough business. And it comes back to the more things you can do, the more often you can find a creative avenue that will pay you a little bit of money so you can keep on, you know, the pursuit of your dreams.
Doing what you love to do.
Well, and out of that has come, I actually did the first 3D animated picture. It was called Orin, The Legend of Star Chaser. I think it came out in the mid-'80s.
Okay.
And I did another thing called the Chipmunk Adventure back before they were doing the CGI stuff. This was animation. So I'd had a couple of good voiceover credits. I could not get anywhere near voiceover. Funny thing was, of all the things I've done, from the acting to, you know, the fight arranging to the, you know, the action choreography, to stunt, you know, I've been doing stunt work too. Yeah. Not that I wanted to land on my head, but it was just kind of like people knew my work and they knew my reputation. So I was getting people calling me going, so I get paid, right? Okay. Oh, geez. So I guess, yeah, I would rather be out there doing the easy stuff, the dialogue, but all right, I'll come in and double somebody or make them look good or whatever. But voiceover may be the most competitive and, you know, really? Hardest nut to crack. I finally got good representation. I'm with an agency called Vox, VOX, and they celebrate my versatility. One of the frustrations about the business is they have a tendency to put you in a box. You know, the fact that I could do action, say, oh, you're a stuntman. Well, I can give you professional level action, but no, I'm an actor. Or, you know, you come in and, you know, so it's just, they want to pigeonhole you. And, oh, and you play bad guys as well. I actually play antagonists, you know, guys who think they're the hero. They just, they do bad shit. You know, because if you don't have a good antagonist, you don't have much of a hero.
Yeah, so, you need to balance it.
Yeah, but with the voiceover, they send me regular copy, you know, like the stuff you sell cars with, you know, and animated things and character things and game things. Red Dead Redemption is one of mine. I play Marshall Lee Johnson, which is a lot of fun. There's another one called Bullet Storm, where well, I play the bad guy, the general, and he is the foulest mouthed SOB you've ever heard. You can apparently either look up Bulletstorm or General Serrano, and there's about 30 minutes of me just swearing my ass off. So it's a pretty good drinking game if you, if you want. But so I enjoy doing voiceover because it keeps my acting chops sharp, and because I started in theater, I have the technique for it, and I love to do voices and accents because accents are they change your rhythm, kind of like, okay, this weapon, you know, I'm going to utilize this way. One of you know, and one of my favorite samples of when people say, well, what choreography do you like? And you know, well, Princess Bride is delightful because you know, you just feel all swashbuckly. And the subtlety of it is, at no time are you worried anybody's actually going to get hurt, because it's a whole celebration of other people's skills and ability. And of course, it's William Goldman, you know, so he's created these great characters. Another one of my favorites is, you know, well, there's the old classics, you know, of Mark Zor with Basil Rathbone and Tyrone Power, and, you know, Robin Hood. And when I did Secondhand Lions, they said they wanted it to look like that. And I said, I can do that, you know, because these are the things I grew up on, and they live in my heart. Prisoner of Zenda, then my fencing master did Prisoner of Zenda, and the court jester, and that's Ralph Faulkner. But in terms of one of the easiest ways, I give people an example of, here's what you should be doing with choreography. You know, there's an old joke that, you know, Shakespeare never wrote any fight scenes. Yeah, he kind of did. You know, it says in the mark, they fight. Well, who fights? The people we've been watching for the previous 4 acts. Those are the guys who show up. You know, the one that, you know, you're just so frustrated with and just really so want the hero, but, you know, but watch out because this guy's, you know, and yeah, and that whole shifting jeopardy, and that's the kind of choreography I like to do. Rob Roy, I think, is a good illustration of, you've got Liam Neeson, and his character is very direct and upright and, you know, straightforward and no nonsense and honest and integrity. And he's using a, you know, a Scottish, you know, basket-hilted broadsword, you know, but he's very linear, you know, in terms of, you know, a movement. Tim Roth, who's playing the bastard, literally, is using a rapier, which is all about deception and illusion and lying, because his character is, you know, a liar and a, you know, he doesn't have any integrity at all. So he won't stand and duke it out. He's constantly gone. He's faking and deceiving, and you're just kind of going, okay, that's interesting. I think that's Bill Hobbs, isn't it?
That's one of his later ones.
Yeah, but you're just looking at it going, I am getting very specific characters utilizing their weapons in a very specific manner that's true to that character, and these weapons are a metaphor for those characters. That's the kind of stuff you want to do. At least I think so. That's the bar you should set yourself. Don't just go, okay, and now we'll wacky, and now we'll wrestle. And
because they've already told us how they're going to use their weapons, whatever they are, by how their characters are developed before that.
Which is more interesting for the actors, more interesting for, you know, it's a tremendous opportunity for the director, and really satisfying for the audience.
You had said something a little bit earlier that got me thinking of that the dialogue connects with the audience mentally,
yes,
but the fight choreography connects with the audience viscerally.
I did not say that here. I said that in the article that I sent you.
Well,
yeah. Well, exactly. I said the power of good action is that you can take the audience out of their safe intellectual observer role and, you know, invite them to become emotionally invested, and they become participants, you know, and it's visceral. And because we're all like that. I mean, you sit in your car and watch somebody cross in front of you on the crosswalk, or you pass somebody on the street. It's just in our nature to go fight or flight, you know, or, you know, I mean, you're looking and going, yeah, okay, I don't have to worry about this guy, or just, you know, you're sitting on a park bench and you're watching people walk by and you invent little stories about them. But it's not because of anything they're saying, it's how they move.
Right.
You know, how do they locomote themselves? You know, how do they, you know, and so when you are creating something on stage, you want to control what the audience sees. In that, you don't want to send them false messages that take people off on, you know, so then they'll feel betrayed when the person, you get what I'm getting?
That's an interesting way to look at it.
But as you say, you can get into somebody's guts to where they're responding, and, you know, the violence has that much more impact than if they're just kind of sitting back with their arms crossed, kind of going, oh yeah, what if we could still be a restaurant open when this is over?
Well, when you use the word betrayed, it's one of the hardest things for any of us to deal with is when somebody says things to us in one way, but act completely differently, and we feel betrayed.
I mean,
And
I love you. I love you so much.
that same betrayal
I,
will show up on stage, on movies.
oh yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and that is what really gets into our hearts and gets us out of our heads, because that sense of betrayal, or that sense of, yeah, I knew he was going to do that.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a really neat way to look at it.
Well,
Now,
it just it makes it more challenging, because you've set the bar higher for yourself to achieve, but it also makes it so much more rewarding, both for us as choreographers or performers, and especially for the audience, which a lot of people forget. In any two-person encounter, the third person is the audience.
yeah.
Don't forget, you're doing this for them, not for you.
And that's a problem that a lot of martial artists who are trying to break into trying to do choreography, I see, have fallen into, is that they forget that this fight isn't about their martial art. It's about, what is the audience going to get out of this? It's
Mhm.
not for me, it's for everybody watching it.
Well, and you're kind of going. Not everybody is necessarily, a 10th degree black belt. Of course, nobody's a 10th degree black belt. Yeah, but so you want someone to have appropriate movement. I mean, Jackie Chan is a master of making something look like it's an accident. You know,
Yeah.
guys are grabbing. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. And which brings in the element of comedy, which you're really good when you can. I did a production of, actually, one of my favorites is a production of Rashomon. It was the 50th anniversary. It was in '84, down at the Old Globe in San Diego, and I was playing the husband and doing the choreography. And it's basically what's really the truth, and you get 4 versions of the truth. But the first one is the bandit who's been captured talking about, oh, I battled the samurai, and it was a mighty battle, and we were amazing, and Clash of the Titans, and ultimately I won. And then there's, him committing suicide through shame and blah, blah, blah. But the last one, I did the same fight, but everything that had gone so right in the first telling of it went so wrong. It was like they were both forced into it. They were shamed by the woman. They didn't really want to fight. I had a whole thing where, when they're coming at each other and nobody really kind of wants
Yeah.
to commit, and then they finally touch sword, and they go, ah, my sword, and the samurai's going over there looking, did you chip my sword, and this and that. And then there's a very complicated section that I put together, and they come in and they separate, and they go to a pose, and then they realize they have the wrong sword. How did I get your sword and you get my sword? And so we switched those off. But all of the stuff that, there's like, I flipped him. Well, I flipped him, and then he flipped me because I got caught up in him. And there was a headbutt in there in the first one, Well, in this one, there's a headbutt, and then we both go, ow! And there was a section where I disarmed, and he's on the ground, and I'm coming down to cut him here like this. And he catches my arms, and then he wraps his legs around. And then I'm stuck with this guy, like it's a swing. And so the audience loved it, but it was, the same thing, which was the whole point of the play. But everything's so right and epic and heroic, and everything's so wrong and terrible and, bumbling, and it, which made it for the comedic choice.
And this goes right back to our talking about, it's just dialogue on the physical level, because every time you have a conversation with somebody, there are 3 conversations going on: what you say, what you mean, and what they heard. And so this is the same kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. And when it's an interesting balancing act, and then again, that's where your art comes in.
Yeah.
That's where a really good director, will help you. But if on stage and off, well, I always ask the director, what do you want this scene to say? What effect do you want to have on the audience? And then, and I work with this one, I'm being the fight choreographer. And I talk to the actor and go, what do you want to do? And then we put these things together. to accomplish those tasks. Having said that, then I like them to leave me alone. Our particular director said, okay, you told me what you want. Now let me go do that, and I will bring it back to you. And, you know, and then if we want to fine tune or whatever, but yeah, that's the idea that you're not just, you know, you're going to get together and wrestle around a little bit, you know.
And then in your chapter, you also mentioned you have that conversation with the director, but then you go and have that same conversation with the actor.
Oh, and well, I think I mentioned too that, you know, we're detectives. You start with the script. What's in the script, you know, and you know, so that's the author's, you know, vision. And then you have the director. How's he interpreting that? That's his reason. Then you have the actor. How's he going to manifest that and give it flesh and blood and this and that? So you have three people plus yourself looking at this source material. And what are they getting out of it? And a lot of time, most people don't see very deep, you know, or realize that. And that's like sometimes when I'm working with somebody and we're working on a fight, I'll talk to them about, you know, well, here's your dialogue. This is what this says. You know, these moves say this to the audience. This is jeopardy. You know, this is danger for our hero or for you. And then what do you do about it? How do you, you know, do you block it? Do you redirect it? You know, what is our choice here going to be that becomes a narrative that the audience can follow? Because if they can't follow it, then they're not going to be emotionally invested. You will distance them and they will be back being voyeurs. You know, they'll be observers, which, you know, what I'm always looking to do is pull them into the fight. So it's as if they're in the fight and they see the jeopardy coming, you know, and you want them to go, oh, look out. I had one of my favorite, I was playing Tybalt at the time. And in the first part, you know, with Mercutio and I, it was all about, you know, finesse and kind of one-upping someone and, you know, just being a little arrogant and, you know, like maybe, you know, clipping them on the ear or something. But it was about technique, and we were both very, very good. And then Romeo gets in the middle, and underneath that, you know, he kills the prince's kinsman, and it's just like, so the next time I come on stage, all I wanted to do was bludgeon him to death.
Yeah.
You know, so we had this whole, you know, fight with rapier and dagger and rapier and cape, and I'm just pounding him. At the end, I've knocked this back, and I come at him, and he catches me with his feet, and he throws me back into the wall, because this is the old theater, and there was a proscenium there. So I hit the wall, and I'm coming off, and he just kind of like sticks his sword out, and I run onto it. Well, the audience is over here, and we're here like this, so it's profile, so they can't tell, but I'm coming up, and I would just come at him with full bore, and then, boom, freeze. And every night I'd hear the audience go, ah, because they were sure I'd been impaled through the neck. You know, and then I would kind of grab this and look at him and slowly pull it out, and then, you know, gonna do the finishing blow, and that was where I died. It was the most theatrical death I could come up with, but it was very, very effective, because every night the audience would go, "Oh, yeah, gotcha."
Now, speaking of characters, you played an iconic character in the He-Man universe. You were Blade.
I got to create a role that didn't exist.
How did you go about creating that character that didn't exist in the earlier universe to make it fit in with something that so many of us grew up with and loved?
Well, I was very, very fortunate. There's He-Man and Tila and, you know, Skeletor, and, you know, that's actually I just tried reading. They're going to do a new. I was doing Skeletor. Yes, the mighty Skeletor for a voiceover thing. Mark Hamill's going to end up doing it. It's for and I'm kind of going, all right, Mark. You know, he's the greatest Joker. So
yeah,
he's also, you know, Luke Skywalker. So fine, I don't mind losing out to him. But any way, I wasn't really that familiar with the universe. I just did this opportunity to play this character. Okay, he's the double swordsman and this and that. Has one eye, and in the script it says I waited a long time for this, and I'm kind of going, all right, he gave me that eye. I started making, and then they had me train. They were having me train elf and choreograph, and which was great. Except I trained him for a month, and then I didn't see him for a month, and I kept talking to the coordinator, Walter Scott, who was the same coordinator on Secondhand Lions. I love working with Walter, but I kept going, when can I see the location, so that, because there's the other thing. We do all this for the audience, but you have the two characters in conflict, and then there's their environment. That's another character.
Yeah.
And you can either ignore it, and fight against it, or you can embrace it, and so it becomes a very useful tool, to tell your story. I said, well, when can I see the location so I could come up with some ideas for you? He said, we're going to have all kinds of time. Quit bugging me about it. Well, we went down to, it was a little town in Orange County. The name escapes me at the moment. We were there for 6 weeks of nights. What do you think was the first thing we shot on our first night?
Your fight.
The fight scene. So basically I went, oh, hey, Dolph, good to see you again after a month. Remember that thing that I taught you when we were, training? All right, that's what we're going to do here, and I'm in my, you'll appreciate this. Chainmail's kind of heavy, right?
It does tend to be that.
A little bit, and getting it to balance on your body is, a lot of why you want your own, and, one size doesn't fit all in armor, etc. Well, my introduction to it was the costume lady made my chainmail out of, because this is what, 87, yeah. I think. There wasn't a lot of people making chainmail at the time. So she took 10 6-foot lengths of pipe and cut it into 1/4-inch pieces.
Oh,
so I was wearing about 50 feet of pipe, in surgical rubber. At the end of the day, I would take my boots off and pour water out. I expected a fish to come out, but it moved great. But it was, boy,
it was heavy.
And in that scene, he's going to grab Saurod, the lizard man, and throw him into my chest from, he's half a story up, he's on, he's on like a platform, and I'm kind of going, oh, good, I get to be your stunt pad. Okay. So there wasn't nearly as much sword play as I would have liked, but it's the nature of the business. It happens. But anyway, you asked how creating it. Essentially, I looked at what made sense to me, and I interacted, with Skeletor, and I interacted with Evelyn, which was delightful. I love working with her, and just played all of the truth of the scenes as they showed up in the script. And Gary must have liked what I was doing. Gary Goddard, the director, because he pretty much left me alone. So I went, okay, if he doesn't like what there's one thing where the guy, he went on to, he was Lieutenant Paris in Star Trek Voyager, when I was on playing Maj Kulla, I guest starred 5 times as Maj Kulla in Star Trek Voyager, and then he became the producer of Chuck, but in this he's the young leading man, the boyfriend of Courtney Cox. I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but he's there, and he's got the collar of truth on him, and Gary said, can you give him a little scare? And I went, sure. And normally I wouldn't do this without telling an actor, but he knew me and this and that, so I had a couple of knives it was a Gerber, double-edged fighting knife, and I pulled it out and I flipped it around and I stuck it next to his head. So his reaction was real. There was plenty of room, but camera over here, no depth. But yeah, I didn't tell him I was going to do that.
That'll get his attention.
But it was an organic moment. But again, he trusted me, so I would never violate that trust. But it's been kind of cool because an awful lot of people. We were just in Germany, for this. They've been trying to get me over there for a convention for a long time, and when we were down in Australia, I had I had a little kid come up to me. Apparently, it had been his brother's favorite toys, and they had kind of, the older one had it, and then he passed it to the middle one, and now it was to the youngest one, who was a lot younger, and they were his favorite toys. And so I came to realize that this was a big movie to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I saw it a little just recently again, and it's kind of went, this actually holds up pretty well. The whip sequence, the plasma whip. They said, okay, we're going to give you this handle, and do this. It's kind of like the whip work that they did in the Halle Berry Catwoman, where everything was. It was actually what what's his name? Gary Powell wanted to do for Indiana Jones and Crystal Skull. He's going, I don't, you don't have to teach him too much. I'm going to put a handle in his hand. And I'm going, don't make that decision yet. This is his iconic character action prop,
Yeah.
But I just said, said to the on Masters of the Universe, is I happen to know a little something about whip. I was evolving my system at that point in time. And I said, at least film me using a whip so you can see how the whip moves and how I move the whip with my body. Most people stand still and plant their feet and just use this. I'm using my whole body for everything. And so they did. And then when they animated, it actually looks pretty good because you can see the movement of the whip. And then I was, able to do, they kind of went, oh, okay, he's doing this movement like he showed us. So we'll animate the whip in being motivated again, by his core and feet instead of just waving his hand around.
Like any other martial art.
Yes, as we, but well, it's always because of study. I kind of went, when all the parts work together at the same time, no one part has to do more than its share, and you are enormously effective and powerful. When you're a bunch of fragments, it's not nearly as effective. And the first thing you do, it's like, it starts from the feet. Your feet unlock your hips, and gives you the ability to move and generates power and all these other things. The minute you plant your feet, you're just a stationary target. And going into choreography, the minute you plant your feet, you stop telling your story. Yeah. You're essentially dead from the waist down. And not only is it less effective, but the other thing is you can no longer control distance or what the audience sees if you're on stage, or what the camera sees if you're on a movie set. You have to be aware of where the camera is, know how, what angle do I want this to be seen from? And especially when the camera's in motion, you have to be busy with you and telling your story and doing your physical dialogue and everything, but knowing where that camera is so that, shit, he's moved over there. I've got to get my partner, and again, without stacking up so that, I'm invisible and without covering them. And so there's a lot of stuff going on that you have to be aware of while you're still focused on doing your job.
Speaking of circles and moving around, you did another rule that's in an iconic universe, and that's the Highlander universe, the Highlander TV show. Mm-hmm. You played a character and helped do the fight choreography.
Yeah,
a couple of. Can you tell us about that?
I did Highlander twice. Season 3, I did an episode called Blackmail, and that was where I first met Braun, and I liked him immediately. But Braun is enormously talented, very, very experienced, very, very knowledgeable, and very smart. He's and he tells great stories too. Buy him a drink sometime.
Yes, he does.
But because sometimes when you walk on somebody else's set, and you're coming in and, okay, I'm guest starring, but I also do your job too. I also work as a, fight choreographer and a weapons expert and a sword master, etc. And, sometimes you have to overcome, what can be potential friction. Not with Braun. Braun's going, thank God you're here. I love your work. And, what do you want to do? In other words, he basically said, now I only have to choreograph half the fight. And when we work together, it's exactly the way I like to work, which is, okay, who initiate? Well, first off, what's the tool? what's the nature of the tool? And he went over and he had this barrel of kind of crappy aluminum swords. You know, he said, oh, here, just have this. You'll have something like this. And of course, you know, Adrian, you know, Highlander will have his katana. So we started doing so. Okay, who initiates? Blah, blah, blah. And so you basically, you have an attack. Okay, I'm going to defend and then I'm going to counter. I could do it this way or I could do it this way. What do we want? A or B? Oh, let's do B. Okay, boom. So now I'm going to, for my counter, I'm going to do this. What are you going to do? And so we would evolve a phrase in a fairly organic manner. And he was aware of Adrian's abilities, and you know, and then I was giving him the energy that felt right for my character, and you know, and stuff. He didn't have to invent my half. We just we worked off of each other. It was a dialogue, which was great. So we did that when, except again, we always had no time. We had a scene in a maze, which we got there and threw it together. Oh, he also gave me this sword. It was like a cicada, except it was broadsword length, so it was a heavy piece of crap. Yeah, but he was kind of going, sorry, man, but yeah, here, it's all right. I'll work with it. So we did that, and then when we got to our final fight, we're in this big house that has these like $50,000, you know, a pane etched glass, you know, they're on motors and they open and they close. So it's sort of like the mirror scene in Bruce Lee's Enter the Dragon. But prior to that, we're in a living room, and he said, and I get there, he says, okay, what are we going to do? Because we got about half an hour before we're going to film. And he says, well, that bookcase and that TV has to die. Everything else, okay, what do you want to do? So we threw together this sequence and killed the bookcase and killed the television, you know, and then I gave a sidekick to Adrian and says, no, give me a little something. I says, okay, you know, and I, you know, tagged him, and, well, he's a good martial artist. And, you know, ran out of the room, and then we started playing hide and seek through these things, you know, and then we get out to the pool. Basically, we were choreographing as we were filming.
Wow.
But, you know, Adrian's, a lot of respect for Adrian, because he takes responsibility for his own training. So at the time, they were doing 22 episodes a season. So he would have at least 22 fights, usually more. And then in the off season, he was training. So the difference between what I'd seen in season 1, when I first looked at the show and went, yeah, they haven't quite figured this one out yet, to season 3 and watching the, you know, the flashbacks, and I just go, wow, this is a great show. It's really cool to be on it. So he actually, I found out after the fact, he called up the producer and said, this guy's really good. Do we have to kill him? You know, yeah, you know, the guy has to. So, so I kind of pestered them for over a year and said, so, you know, can I get back on the show? And David Abramowitz, who's the showrunner, okay, you were so distinctive, you know, and, you know, I mean, everybody loved you and blah, blah. I said, well, I'm an actor. I can be different. So he said, if you can come up with a backstory we haven't done, you know, maybe then we'll see. So I had a meeting where I came in and I pitched him 5 ideas. Well, they were almost in their 100th episode. So, you know, that was kind of like season 2. Oh, we did that one in season 4. Oh, da, da, da. And then I came up with the debt that can never be repaid. And that's the one that they wrote, originally called The Mysterious Circle. It became called Duende. And that was where I got to introduce the Mysterious Circle to the screen. It had never been on screen before. Interestingly enough, I had helped a woman write a Zorro script for the Antonio Banderas, The Mask of Zorro, I think that one's called, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that was where they introduced the concept of the circle. But she basically wrote The Daughter of Zorro, and that's not what Spielberg wanted. So she didn't get to do it. But when I saw the movie, I was kind of going, interesting. They were using different illustrations. You'd probably recognize the illustrations they used. But so I almost got close to that. As a matter of fact, I had gone in to take a meeting about choreographing me the Swordmaster on that movie, and I got to present to Robert Rodriguez. But 3 days later, he left the project, and Martin Campbell brought in Bob Anderson, and kind of gone, Yeah, well.
I mean, to
But
lose out to Bob Anderson.
then Highlander called me up and said, "You want to go to Paris and do this episode?" And I said, "Yes, I do." So we did that, and then Braun and I, I took my concept of the circle, and the character, at least through the eyes of my character, and Braun and I put this together. And once again, we were always choreographing about 5 minutes ahead of what we were going to film. Do you have any stuff from Thibault's what is it, L'Académie Espé, or
I have the book,
ah
and I also have a couple people that have been doing a lot of research into it
mhm,
outside of Ray and Jeanette.
mhm.
And
Well, they
so,
don't care for it because they apparently Narvaez, I think it said it deserves to be relegated to the sepulcher of forgetfulness or something to that effect. Uh,
one of my friends down in San Diego,
Yeah.
he's been doing a lot of research into it, but looking at not just the fencing, but how it ties into the dance of the period, because a lot of the terminology also refers to the dance work.
yeah.
It's popular.
Yeah, kind of. It's interesting. Well, a lot of people don't know, that modern fencing,
Mhm.
kind of grew out of. Sorry, not. I reversed this. Ballet grew out of fencing in the court of Louis XIV. That positions and turned into the discipline of ballet, which is torturous. But so it's kind of interesting. When I was doing the Duende episode, the mysterious episode of mysterious circle episode rather of Highlander, Braun and Richard Martin, who's the director, he's son of what is it, Dan Rowan and Dick Martin. He's the son of Dick Martin, remember from Laughing?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and he's a very funny fellow and very talented guy, and loved working with him. Anyway, we were walking through Paris, and we walked past a window, and there in the window was an illustration from Thibault. And I thought, well, this is propitious, because you probably, from the article you read, at the time there was literally nothing available that was of much use or that said anything positive about it.
Right.
They all talk about, it's metaphysical and blah, 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 and it's too complicated and blah, blah, and for this and that. And I'm kind of going, well, you are trying to freeze in time and put down on paper something that's essentially by its very nature organic, and constantly in motion. So I was kind of going, okay, I'm looking at the foot patterns, and it looked a little like Arthur Murray, or you're old enough to remember that reference.
I know what
They
you're
used to
talking
teach
about.
yeah, exactly. And but I mean, I had a decent blade background thanks to Maestro Faulkner and my fencing, and then and I looked at that and I went, this reminds me of the foot patterns from Filipino Kali, which there's 8 angles plus a circle. I mean, I tell people in the big picture, there's 8 angles of attack with a blade that you can cut or thrust on. You could say 360, but let's say 8. And that's true of every weapon, every system, particularly weapon system. And I say, and as far as footwork goes, there's forward and back. And you can have advances, you can have balestras, you can have crossovers, whatever you want to call them. You have side to side, and there are variations of that, of just shuffling the side or turning profile to face, or ending up in a volt or a an incortata. This is all European, and then the Japanese have their variation on it. Their kirikaishi, which is a step change, which throws that foot around behind you like that. And then you have what I refer to as descending and ascending diagonals, which in Filipino Kali is male triangle and female triangle. But you look at it and you're going, I'm building a wall and getting behind it. Those are descending. I'm building a wall and monitoring something as it goes by, and I enter, and then I create a new center line. So you've got 8 angles of footwork plus a circle. Yeah. And that's all there is. Everything else is, I'm pretty sure I can say that. You will correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm kind of going, big picture wise, everything is a variation on that, you know, and it may be cultural specific or weapon specific or this or that. But, you know, because in the business that I'm in, I'm trying to impart knowledge and not have people get lost in the minutia, because you can spend decades wallowing in the details that you're going, you know, you're making this a lot harder than it has to be.
Yeah, really. The whole Spanish system is so interesting in the way that they break the blade up into multiple pieces, and you've got small changes that affect the way the interaction between the blades, and it's really a neat system.
Well, as I said, at the time, I didn't really know anything about it. There wasn't anything available, really. Egerton Castle was taking pot shots at it and stuff like that. But I looked at it and I went, okay, I know the sword, I know the feet from, you know, related arts, putting the two together, and then I know who I want this guy to be. You know, they kept talking about, you know, continual practice, you know, gave you that Spanish coolness and defiance, you know. Well, you get, if you practice all the time, you get a certain confidence, you know, so it kind of comes with it. You
And
know,
they
and then there's, I just
I'm
would say there
sorry.
was all this stuff that was supposed to be metaphysical and blah, and I says, I don't care about any of that, you know, in terms of what I want. You know, I want this erect, defined posture, and then I want to have these, you know, staccato foot changes, because you get a lot of torque, you know, and this and that. And I have, this will be exciting, and what I like is it's never been on film before, and you also are always at sword's point. You know, you are, you know, the lineus infinitus. If nobody comes any closer, you know, nothing can happen. But all somebody has to do is change the angle, and they very subtly entered that 3 fingers that's necessary to hit something vital.
Give somebody a very bad day.
But it's one of my favorite roles. You know, one of my favorite partners with Braun. You know, and then Adrian. You know, we worked together twice. I think probably the only other person that comes close is Jet Li when I did Fearless, and they had me come in to do the Spanish swordsman. Funny thing was, I was utilizing, you know, essentially destreza. I was using the angles, and the fellow who was the DP, he used to be a performer. He came from a background of being one of the guys in, you know, the classic kung fu movies. And then he went behind camera, and he came over to me and was talking, and which I guess was kind of unusual, because Jet kind of walked by and sort of pointed and took a couple pictures of us and stuff. But the DP said, "Oh, you know, I'm a Wing Chun man." He could recognize the angles of what I was doing, and see how the art that he had studied, the parallels. So I kind of went, well, I'm doing my job. This is really good. But yeah, working with Jet was, he's very fast. It was really great because I had hoped to train with the team for a week, but they were running a little behind. And so I didn't get that. I walked on stage, we shook hands. Wu Ping's team threw a bunch of stuff together. You know, when he and Jet liked the looks of it, Jet and I got up, walked it a couple times, shot it at speed. And the weird thing was they were choreographing my Spanish saber as if it was a Chinese weapon. And I'm going, and they they thought Western swordplay is what they'd seen in the movies.
Mm-hmm.
And he literally did this 3 times and went pokey, pokey, pokey. And I went, I'll give you 3 thrusts, but I will not do pump the arm, pokey, pokey, pokey. Yeah. So, you know, I did a lunge and a pass forward and a recovery and a redoublement, and got what they wanted. And, you know, I realized very quickly they were utilizing me to motivate Jet's cool moves that he's done thousands of times before. And I had to fully commit to where Jet was going to be, even though he wasn't there yet. And yet at the same time, always hold back a little bit. So I would never, I'd fully commit my body, but I'd never release the hand until I say, yeah, okay, you're going to be there. And so it was a lot of fun. But they were having me attack the quadrants. And I went, okay, this choreography doesn't make sense to me. This isn't how I like to work. But they've all been working together for 20 years or more. So it's their house. I had to come in and, you know, and they're very, very staccato. I kind of like, you know, other maybe slightly more flowing things. But I realized that they needed me to go to different places that weren't necessarily logical. But I said, okay, I'll do that, but do you mind if I get there this way instead of this way? And I guess someone on the team said, who's choreographing this, us or the Guilo? And Wu Ping said, this Guilo knows what he's doing. So after that, we didn't have any trouble. And basically, I'd said to Jet, because we didn't get to, you know, train with the team and go, okay, I'm going to target here and here and here and here, just so that, you know, he would know and go, oh, you're doing what you said you were going to do. I have confidence in you. And he says, oh, you're very skilled, and that's why we have you here. And, you know, I can see you're concerned with my safety. And I said, yes. And he goes, me too, and laughed. and we got on just dandy. But I had to bring my A game, because Jet's very experienced, very, very talented and skilled. And he's very fast. There's only one piece of wire work, which they did in our second phrase. And I'm like going, we really didn't need this, but they're used to doing that, you know, and it's like, we could have gotten this timing, but you know, they do what they do. And, but then after that, everything is shot in a master, which except for a couple of quick inserts. Oh, they also, here's a little story for you. Whenever I go someplace, I take wardrobe. I took gauntlets. I took shoes with a high Spanish heel. I took leggings that I got when I was in Spain, you know, which are a wraparound, you know, tight wrapped, period correct, you know, thing. I'm going, if they have better wardrobe than this, I'll wear theirs. If they don't, I at least have something I know I can work with. And sure enough, he used all of my stuff. But they also had the idea of having an arm shield. Well, they wanted to put the arm shield on this arm, you know, along with my sword. And I went, well, you know, if we put it over here, I have something I could potentially do. So that gave me a chance to, you know, block at one point. And then at another point, you know, this was Ping's idea of the insert to cut it off me, you know, so, oh, we made something out of it. And then the, you know, the Spanish saber, we had originally gone through and designed a saber, you know, this went on for about 2 or 3 months. And I had Dave design something that was based on an Austrian curved blade cavalry saber with, you know, perforations in the grip. And it was really, really lovely. And I had him make 2. And I gave one to Jet when, you know, when we got there, but he kind of went, yeah, heavy. Because we were using chambra swords, which are essentially bamboo, you know, wrapped in mylar or whatever. Light and fast, but you still have to play the weight of them. But they were still pointy. We could very easily have poked each other's eyes out, or, you know, stabbed somebody in the throat. But they, you know, that's traditionally what they do. And when they got the, you know, I had met Wu Ping on a lunch break just for like 5 minutes, and that was when he took the sword and went pokey, pokey, pokey. So that later on, you know, I went, oh my God, he thinks that swordplay, Western swordplay, is what he's seen in Western movies, which is usually awful. And I'm going, but they decided, I brought along 2 swords, silly me. One was the curved bladed Austrian, and the other was the straight bladed patent sword, patent cavalry saber. And he liked that one. So even though the team had taken my sword, the minute I arrived, they grabbed it, because they, you know, I started building, and they built a beautiful version of it. They immediately had to, nope, he wanted the straight blade. And I tried to suggest, well, you know, you have the straight bladed double-edged chin, and then if you have a slightly curved, you know, cavalry saber with a true edge and a partial false edge and a guard, and he kind of goes pokey, 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 and goes off to lunch. And I went, I'm not sure I got my message through. So just, I was trying to suggest that the curve added an element visually as opposed to 2 straight bladed blades. But you do what you can. And so he ended up with a straight bladed sword. At the end, he actually did happen to notice, you know, because that's why I love European swords. They have hand shields. But he does the thing where he puts his sword through mine to twist and disarm me. And then we had a little moment that Um, 'cause originally it was supposed to, they had hired me because I could do both sword and whip. You know, they were going, well, you know, somebody who can do this, and my name kept coming up, which was nice. And they whittled it down from like 16 to 4. So I made the cut all along. But you know, after our first day of, you know, we would throw something together, walk it twice, shoot it at speed, never more than 2 takes. And I think we only did that once.
That's
And
amazing.
then we would do it all over again. So neither one of us really knew the choreography. But, you know, with our, God knows, 60 or 70 years of combined knowledge, he'd move, I'd adjust. I'd move, he'd adjust. So it was a very organic fight. It was really kind of, I really loved working with it. It was a nice. It's why you never stop training, because you might get to fight Jet Li one day.
And both of you are so fluid. It's a lovely fight to watch.
Well, and what I tried to do was stay true to my character and the weapon and the line.
Yeah.
So I have some still pictures from the thing. We didn't pose for them. Those were taken. So that full extension where he drops down and twists and sticks his sword up through, you know, through the guard. That was done at speed.
Wow.
You know, so it was really pretty cool. So that's another one of my favorites.
Now, if you could work on any project of your dreams, what would that project look like?
Well, it'll be a little different now than it would have been 30 years ago or 20 years ago or 10 years ago.
That's very true.
It was funny when I met Harrison Ford, because I'd managed to get it wasn't easy. I'd managed to get my demo reel to the producers. Finally somebody saw it, and I guess forwarded it to Harrison, and Harrison called me up and goes, is this Anthony DeLongis? And I said, yes. Why do I know this voice? This is Harrison Ford. And, oh, well, I guess we better get you in here to, you know, give me some, you know, brush off the dust and do some whip stuff. And when we first met, he said, you're an amazing swordsman. I said, oh, thank you. When are we going to do a sword picture? He saw that I had a structure. When he was first doing, you know, the whip, they'd kind of given him a whip, and, you know, with the usual Yankee cranky and, you know, flail about a little bit. He only does in Temple of Doom. There is one shot where you see him throw the whip from start to finish, and it disarms a guy's sword.
Yeah.
Everything else is done in cuts. And unlike Michelle, where everything is done full figure, start to finish, you actually see her and the whip and everything else. And you can do it. The audience, you know, the audience puts the story together. But even the waist wrap at the end, you know, is done in cuts. So anyway, he saw that I had a methodology, and he liked it, and he embraced it. And alas, I didn't get to go on the film. I was supposed to, but one thing and another, you know, there's politics in this business. But I got him prepped, and he did all of his own whip work, and such as it was. But I would like to have seen a lot more.
Yeah.
One of the things that drove me crazy was he's got the whip on his side, and he has the big fight with the Russian. And he ends up picking up a log as an equalizer. And I'm kind of going, you've got your whip. Use the handle of the whip. Yeah, because I'd indicated to him, well, here's, you know, long range, obviously. And he got very, very good. I said, I'll stand in front of you, and you can take cigars or guns out of my hand. But he said, there's also medium and close range stuff. And he kept going, well, he's not a martial artist. But I'm kind of going, yeah, but he's a smart man, you know, and you think outside of the box. And I didn't get to meet Spielberg on that, which is the first time I'd worked on a project and not met the director, which is a little frustrating, but because I'd always wanted to, in one of his movies, have Indiana Jones, you know, somewhere dusty, and he blows this off, and there is a picture of, you know, 3,000 years old, because it dates to 3000 BC in both the Chinese and Egyptian culture we know of, but somebody with a whip. And kind of going, that would be a nice moment.
Yeah, that would be very cool.
Yeah. Well, maybe he'll hear about it.
Well, if Harrison Ford is watching any of my videos, wow.
No, there you go.
So I've got to close up, but you and I, or I first met you in New York at a Western martial arts convention. You were teaching whip and sword, and it was lunchtime, and we happened to be sitting at the same table, and it amazed me because I had just watched The Warrior and the Sorceress with you and David Carradine.
I was going to say, I worked with David 3 times over the years. Yeah.
And I told you this, and that got us to talking, and that was the very first time we met. And it obviously it had a big impact on me because I've taken every opportunity. What's that?
Well, I just said, well, thank you. I was going to say, was this the thing that the maestros Ramon and Jeanette Martinez hosted in upstate New York?
Yes, in Amsterdam, I believe.
I was teaching a whip class in a coat closet. Basically, they'd taken the space up and divided it with curtains, and somebody had a big section, and then 2 of us had little sections. You know, there's another one where we were in an attic with her. I said, "Yeah, is there ceiling space?" I says, "Oh yeah." Well, there was, except they had beams running across, and I'm kind of going, "I can work like this, but it's hard for other people." But yeah. So you, that was where we first met.
That was where we first met. And I remember I said, I just saw you and the Warrior and the Sorceress. And I remember you saying, I'm sorry.
It was one of those cases, you do the best you can with what you've got. Always.
Right. It wasn't the best script.
And sometimes it gets to be magic. Well, the funny thing was, he'd just come from doing a picture called Lone Wolf McQuaid.
Oh yeah,
and the,
love that movie.
The production manager on that was getting to direct. You know, this is a Roger Corman thing, and I guess he'd sold the script. And I went in when I read for the part I was going to play, and I go, mysterious stranger pits the forces of evil against each other, and I made a Rashomon reference, and the guy goes, well, I don't know what that is. I'm kind of going, well, either you're a dumbass or or you're lying. But, you know, I didn't push it, and then I got to do the thing, and we got down there. And it was a Roger Corman picture, and he'd just finished doing Death Stalker, whichever number it was.
Yeah.
You know, on those sets with more or less the same costumes. And so as soon as that one wrapped, they pushed the sand dunes around a little bit differently and made a couple of changes in the wardrobe. That was back in the days when I could go topless, and, you know, and we were right away started filming. So I'm going, well, this is kind of interesting because the first movie I ever did was a Roger Corman movie where I was an extra in the background riding a bicycle for $15 a day, cutting class from, you know, in college, or I was supposed to be in class, but I was trying to get into the movies. But Roger was very famous for being king of the bees, you know, the bee movies, and
Yeah.
it was reputed to be a formula for every 3 pages you had some breasts, and every 5 pages, you know, you had a fight, which was probably about right. But anyway, yeah, I'd work with Dave again. It's you watch something and you hope, and you go, this could be a good solid B movie, and okay, a B- movie, okay, a C+ movie, and then, you know, and it was hampered by the fact that the director didn't speak any of the languages. His interpreter was, the camera crew was Italian, and the rest of the crew were South American.
Wow.
So we were jumping around with that a little bit. We had, when we were indoors, they were using bee smoke to, you know, smoke it up to, you know, play with the light.
Yeah.
Well, that's all well and good, but it puts bees to sleep. It does the same thing with people. It also leaves a nice oily film on everything. So
Wow.
crap. When David and I are fighting at the end in sand, which is really good for the knees. Not only does he have a metal sword and I have a wooden sword at one point, but I have the magic sword. I have the power, you know. There seems to be a theme here. Oh, the smoke in the background were tires. They were burning tires. You know,
wow.
Carcinogenic, and you're puffing and puffing and sucking this stuff into your lungs. And, but the director had irritated everybody so much that they sent back his negatives in nothing longer than 200 feet and nothing marked. So footage that we had gotten in the final assembly wasn't. So that was why I sort of went, sorry, in that, yeah, I was just watching, you know, this could have been so much better.
Yeah.
if, you know, everybody else had worked as hard as a couple of us were doing. I
One
did
of
learn the first Spanish phrase there, though. Cocodrilos son los bolsillos. I went out with the stunt guys, you know, one night. We had a good time, and we got on very well because, I ended up. David had hurt his hand at one point. He'd broken some knuckles, so they had him in a cast, and I switched everything over to his left hand, and I could actually double him because I could mimic his walk. And so I was doing that, and there was a whole thing where it was very Rashomon. I'm sorry, very Yojimbo, where I had him constantly marching towards camera, just going through guys, and you're
Yeah.
revealing the fact it's, you know, it's our hero. And anyway, we went out and, you know, it had a lovely time and talking. They spoke no English, I spoke no Spanish, but we, you know, had a good time. The more we drank, the more fluent I became. But they liked the fact that I wanted to contribute, you know, and pay in the bill. And they said, yeah, most of the time we go out, you know, with actors, and it's like, you know, cocodrilos son los bolsillos. They have crocodiles in their pockets, and they're afraid to put their hand into their wallet. I've always, wherever I go on location, I always hang with the crew, because, well, first off, if you if you show up ready to do your job and you make their job easy, they love you for it.
Yeah.
And they'll do everything they can to help you look great. If you're an ass, you know, then they'll kind of go, okay, you're right. You don't need us. You're the star. So, you know, if you want to get them on your side, you know, do your job well, make their job easy. And I would always talk to, you know, camera and go, don't bug the director. He's busy. You know, talk to camera. Where's your shot? You know, are you tight? Are you halfway? Are you, you know, this and that? So I know I can make the medium work for me, which you have to do. You're still trying to capture a performance, be it on stage or on film, but you also, you know, there's, if I'm doing voiceover, if I'm doing on camera, if I'm doing on stage, there are technical elements that you need to be aware of so that you don't do stupid things.
Right. One of the things I like to do at the end of these is, we've known each other for many years now. What's a memory that you have of something we've done together?
I was doing a demo at Combat Con. I've been at every Combat Con but one. I think it was 2014. I was working in Mexico on a project called Texas Rising. So Mary came and represented, and very well, and you know, so the family was there. But the first time I met you was you had just given an armor demo, a fighting and armor demo. So you're in everything except your bassinet helmet.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we did our demo and this and that, and I was talking a little bit about, you know, not only your long range, but medium and close range and this and that. And you sort of piped up from the background and said, well, you know, and you pulled a rondelle, you know, and I'm kind of going, okay.
One of these.
I don't know this guy, or I didn't recognize you, you know, because you were in full kit armor, and which you hadn't been in New York. And I'm going, well, what I would do is one of the things I do with the whip is I will throw it, and it'll go like a boleadora around your legs. And if I can catch your legs right, I'll trip you, you know, and then hopefully but I really don't want to wrestle with you in armor or out. That's why I'm a weapons guy. Stay the hell away from me. But I was just kind of pondering in my mind, do I want to do this or not? Probably not. So we managed to execute, but I was just sort of going, I really loved your demo. I'm sure you're a very nice fellow, but you never really know when,
Yeah.
you know, as martial artists, there's often that attitude of, yeah, we have that, only we do it better, you know,
Yeah.
or that somebody wants to, we're all here to help each other, right?
Well, on that note, let me right now apologize for putting you in that kind of position.
Nope. It didn't go to, it just crossed my mind. You know, I extricated myself, and, you know, neither one of us lost face, and it was fun, and we met each other later, and, you know, we've become such good friends. It does bring up a little element about, you know, I've worked with some of the biggest names in the business, and, you know, both, you know, film, stage, television, and opera. And the first thing I always do is I win people's trust, and I've been successful at it 99.9% of the time. Because you have run into some very big egos, but I try to impart very early on that I am here to help you look great.
Yeah.
I'm your ally. I am not your adversary.
And you're one of the nicest, most humble, and talented people I've met. And it's been a true pleasure to get to know you even more, you and Mary, and to get to train with you.
Well, I'm looking forward to doing a lot more. And
thanks again for spending the time with me. It's always a pleasure.
My pleasure. All right. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. That was fantastic. It's always a pleasure to listen to your stories, Anthony. If you enjoyed what you heard tonight, please hit the subscribe button below, subscribe to our channel, and watch the other interviews that we have in the pandemic interview series. We also have a lot of martial arts videos from our school that will take you into different techniques and different weapon systems that we teach at Gavin Rich European Martial Arts School.